year, we're not having 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 Christmas services. We are going to have 6 of them, and we're going to do them all right here at home this year. We couldn't be more excited, and we would love it if you would put it on your calendar today to be a part of one of these with us. All 6 are going to be identical, and in the weeks ahead, we're going to ask that you reserve a seat at one of them. We expect a full house at all of them. And we want to make sure that you and everybody you love, that you want at least to sit by you, gets to sit by you. So again, you can see it on the screen, but we're going to do Sunday the 22nd. We're going to do just 9 and 11 in the morning. We'll come back, we'll do 5 and 7 at night. And then on Monday, the 23rd, we're going to do 5 and 7 again, and we will not be tired at the end. So do put that out there now so that you can tell everybody you know and invite them to be a part of it with you. We believe it'll be a great way to kick off Christmas week together. Today, we are going to continue our series where we just keep saying, don't wish you didn't. And here's what we mean by that. Don't wish you didn't ask these questions that we are exploring. So if you are with us for the first time or you haven't been here in a few weeks and you need to catch up, the good news is the internet is real, and all of these videos are on our YouTube page, or you can go to our website or our app, and you can get caught up there. I believe these 5 questions are great guide rails or fences for us to kind of play with life in, where we're just kind of checking in with ourselves on a regular basis to make sure that the decisions we're making are wise and prudent decisions, because you make a ton of decisions every single day. Where I want to start is by asking you a really simple question. Who is the greatest salesperson that you have ever met in your life? You probably don't know their name. You just know what they sold you, right? It was maybe the person at the car dealership. You walked out with the top tier trim when you had no intention of walking out with that car. It might be the person at the cell phone shop that sold you the Pro model when all you really needed was the whatever model. You didn't need all the bells and whistles, but they got you to believe that you did. For some of you, it's at the clothing store where you came in for like socks and you walked out with a week's worth of outfits because they told you how amazing you looked and everything. They were just really good salesperson. They get you to get the warranty. They get you to give them your email address and sign up for the rewards program, even though you live in another state and you're never going back to that store. It is amazing what really good salespeople can do, but all of them pale in comparison to the best one that I know. It's actually the best one that you know, too. It's you. You are the greatest salesperson you will ever meet. The voice in your head is the most convincing voice that you have in your life. That voice in our head can get us to do things that we don't want to do. It can get us to say things that we didn't want to say, buy things that we didn't want to buy, go places we didn't want to go. And somehow, some way, as we go there, as we buy it, as we say it, as we do it, we convince ourselves that it's okay, that we deserve it, we've earned it, we have a right to it. And as long as nobody else finds out, we'll be all right. It's amazing how often I have tricked myself and conned myself into believing certain things were true that weren't true. I'm the best salesman. Now, you might work in conjunction with a really good salesperson at a store like I did. It's no secret that I love Disney World. And my favorite place at Disney World is the park called Epcot. And whenever anybody asks me, like, why don't you just go to other countries and see more of the world? Why do you waste all your money going to Disney World? My answer is because I can go around the world in one day at Epcot. So who's the smart one now? I mean, I have been to Paris, France 12 times. How about you? And in Paris, there is this really great fragrance shop. So you can buy perfume and cologne there. And in that fragrance shop is the greatest saleswoman to ever live because she got me to buy a ridiculously expensive bottle of cologne because she told me that I would smell like $1 million. And one of her tactics was, "Sir, do you know what $1 million smells like?" I said, "No, I don't." She's like, "You're gonna now. This cologne smells like rich mahogany and leather-bound books. people will stop to ask you to smell you again. And then the real cherry on top was she told me that the King of England wears this cologne. Now, what's crazy is that at this point in the story, there was no King of England. It was just the Queen, but I couldn't help myself. I was just totally fixated on smelling really good. And here's what happened. She was really a great salesperson, but then she handed it off to me. And I started telling myself crazy things. Like, well, I'm a pastor, and people are always hugging me. They want to hug a pastor that smells good. People's eternal souls weighs on whether or not I smell good. I want to smell good. You know, like, you start telling yourself these stories, and then they throw at you like, well, if you buy it today, you can get a second one at like 2% off. And you're like, that's a steal. I gotta buy that. I'm just being wise, and I'm being frugal, and I'm using my money, and I'm being a good steward of what God has given me. This is the story. It's not about how I smell anymore. Because I'm spinning up a story that justifies something that I want. And as I'm making the decision of whether or not I'm going to spend the money or save the money, I have convinced myself that spending the money is the right thing to do. Not just an option, but the option. This is why this is so important for us to wrestle with. Because I and you have been in on every bad decision you've ever made. You ever thought about that? Every regret you have, you were in on. You were there for it. We can tell ourselves that it was so-and-so's fault, or this circumstance, or that place. We can kind of slip into victim mode, like it all is happening to us. But the common denominator in all of those moments was you. For me, it was me. I was there for all of it. So I better get an idea of how to navigate those decisions in a way where I am not tricking myself or conning myself or spinning a story, or better yet, selling myself some fiction that I want to be fact. We have a way of making what we want to be true feel true and never look at it objectively at all. Which is why this question, the second question in the 5 that we're going to look at, has meant so much to me. And it's really simple to ask, it's really difficult to answer. It's this: am I being honest with myself? Really? Because if you leave the really part off, we're always going to answer yes. Because you would never lie to you, right? You're your own best friend. We wouldn't do that to me. So we have to ask the follow-up question: am I being honest with myself? Really? When I look at it objectively and I think about it from just a straight-up factual perspective, am I really being honest, or am I pretending I'm being honest? Am I telling myself I'm being honest? The difference can feel razor thin, but the outcome of the difference is huge. And so getting to the place where we regularly check in with our own heart and our own soul, asking this question, is vital. And there's a guy in Scripture that I think wishes he would have asked himself this question. In fact, I know he wishes he would have asked it. His name is David. And at the moment we're going to look at in his life, he is the king of Israel. So this isn't shepherd boy David, looking after sheep. This isn't Goliath, giant killer David, that saved the day. This isn't even old David that's passing the throne off to his son Solomon. This is King David in the height of his power and all of his glory and splendor. King David, the man who God said was a man after his own heart. And here's what I'm going to promise you. When we get done with his story today, you are going to wonder why God would ever have said that about this guy. Because he makes a decision that is so messed up and then goes about justifying it in such a messed up way. I find myself wondering, does he love God at all? Because what he does is evil. And we join him in the story, in the record today, right after he wakes up from a good long nap. This is what we read. Late one afternoon after his midday rest, which it would just be awesome to be able to do that every day. Good to be king. David got up out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. As he sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told she is Bathsheba. He knows her name. The daughter of Eliam, now he knows who her daddy is, and the wife of Uriah, he knows who her husband is. Goes on to say, David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. That might seem like, this is just a crazy love triangle story. But don't miss this. David grew up a good Jewish boy. He knew the consequences of sleeping with another man's wife. You don't do it. That is like one of the top sins. It's in the top 10 commandments. Don't commit adultery. You just don't do it. So in order to actually move on that inclination that he has, David has to have gone through a series of mental gymnastics. Well, I'm king. And that kind of means that all of this belongs to me. So I'm not really taking another man's wife. I'm just taking a person that is a part of the kingdom over which I rule. It's not that bad. I'm the king. I work hard all day. I deserve to get something that I want. And he's a guy, and guys have a way of telling themselves really stupid things. And so he may have stood up there and said, she's asking for it, taking a bath on the roof, as if nobody's watching. Right? He had to have justified it somehow in his head to make it go from this would be horrible and awful and wrong to I deserve this, I've earned this. He sells himself a fiction that's more fun than the facts. I do this all the time. You know the old saying, an apple a day keeps the... Right? We're supposed to eat apples regularly because they're super good for us. But I get as excited about eating fruit as I do vegetables. It's just not something I get up in the morning for. So, but I also want to be healthy, and so I've come up with a plan of how to consume apples. I just do it in the form of a pie. And I laugh too, but I promise you there have been moments where I've been consuming more than one piece of pie going, this is basically health food. Because it's full of apples, and apples are good for me. I know, you're like, you sound like a 10-year-old. But don't we all do this all day long? When we cut a corner at work, when we talk about a friend behind their back, when we flirt with the person that's not our spouse, when we lie, when we cheat on our taxes, you don't do it because you want to do something wrong. You do it because you convinced yourself it isn't wrong. You put the sin in a pie and called it a day. And I'm only saying that because I do it all the time. I convince myself all the time that every decision I make is the right and best decision, only later to look back and ask myself, what was I thinking? How did I get myself to believe that this was a good choice? I didn't pause and ask myself if I was being honest with myself. Now with David, instead of just realizing what he's done as wrong, he just piles on the wrong. This is what happens next. Then David sent word to Joab. Joab is kind of the general of the military. Send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent him to David. This next part is like something out of a weird soap opera. When Uriah arrived, David asked him, so how's Joab in the army? How are you guys getting along? And how's the war progressing? As if the king didn't know. He left out the part of, do you want to know how your wife's been doing? Well, you've been out fighting my battle for me. But he's justified it himself. He's just making friendly small talk. Goes on, then he told Uriah, go on home and relax. Code for be with your wife. David even sent a gift to Uriah after he had left the palace, but Uriah didn't go home because Uriah felt guilty that all the men were out in the trenches fighting a war and he was going to go home and be comfortable and warm and happy and with his wife. Now, here's why. This is going to be so crazy to you. Here's why David is pushing him to go home. Because a few days prior, Bathsheba had, well, I was going to say emailed. She didn't email him. She sent him some notice, and it said, I'm pregnant. And David went, uh-oh. So instead of, again, saying, I did something wrong, I made an unwise, imprudent choice, he decides, now here's his logic, I'm going to send Uriah home. Because if he goes home and he sleeps with his wife, and he finds out that she's pregnant, he will believe that baby is his baby. And if he goes home and he's with his wife and they're happy and they want to live happily ever after for the rest of time, and Bathsheba forgets about me, then I'm not a home wrecker. He's selling himself a story that isn't true, but he wants and needs it to be because he doesn't want to own a mistake. I believe that deep down, David has insane regret. And the only thing he can think to do is kind of lie his way out of it. David's messing with a concept called confirmation bias. You've maybe heard of this before. But Uriah comes home from the war believing that he has a happy, healthy, faithful marriage. So if Uriah can get home like David wants him to, and Uriah experiences that, then he'll never be suspicious. Because what he's going to do is he's going to find the things that confirm what he already believes to be true. My wife has been faithful. So he comes home. Look at how, she's welcoming me. Look at how she's prepared a meal for me. Look at all of these things that confirm her faithfulness. And anything that seems sideways or out of sorts will kind of just fall into the shadows. And David's doing the same thing. If he goes home and they stay married and there's no problems, then I'm confirming what I already believe, that I'm not a bad person. I didn't mess up their home. They're going to have a little baby together and that'll be fine. I've got plenty of kids. It's okay. Confirmation bias is a funny thing. We all operate with it all day. You have preconceived notions about the world and you and the people you're around all day, every day. And instead of kind of looking at them or those moments objectively, you find the things in them that confirm what you already believe to be true. I know this because you and I go to the grocery store on a regular basis, and we all believe that we are waiting in the longest line. How is that possible? How can there be so many lines and all of us are in the longest one? There can only be one longest line. But we all think we found it, and here's why. You got into the line already believing you were in the longest line. So you stand there and you go, oh, look at this new clerk. They don't even know how to scan a barcode. I knew it. Oh, look at this guy with 2 carts full. I knew I was going to find the longest line. Oh, now they're making a call to the manager because they're buying alcohol and this is going to take forever. I knew it. I'm never going to get out of here. You are confirming what you already believe to be true. You're not looking at the facts. And if you had the presence of mind to ask anybody else in any other lines, hey, are you in the longest line? They go, you better believe I am. Let me tell you about the clerk and the guy with the 2 carts and the person buying alcohol that needs the manager. We all believe it because we're confirming what we already believe. So when we make a bad choice or we're facing a choice and there's two options, and one of them is more obviously good and one of them is maybe more obviously bad, we will find things to confirm what we want to be true about the bad choice and how it will benefit us and how it will, make us look better and feel better and do all of the things. So David's playing on that with Uriah. He's playing on that with himself. But Uriah doesn't go home. So David has a problem. And the solution he comes up with is wretched. So the next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. Now, listen to the next part and keep in mind that Uriah is literally carrying this in his hand and delivering it. The letter instructed Joab, station Uriah on the front lines where the battle is fiercest, then pull back so that he will be killed. David is so caught up in a poor decision, and he has lied to himself so much that he is able to hand a man his death sentence and force him to carry it to the person who will order the execution. David has convinced himself that murdering Uriah is okay because it's going to make his problems go away. He probably told himself it's for the kingdom. Because if somebody finds out that I did this, they're never going to follow me. We will have chaos and the country will fall apart. So I'm doing this with honor. Sometimes you got to squeeze a lemon to get lemonade. And you and I go, how could David think like this? How could someone after God's own heart, supposedly the most righteous person, the most godly person in the world at this time, is doing things like this? He sounds like a villain from a Marvel movie. David wasn't thinking, though. He was selling. He was selling himself over and over again that this was a good choice. Not a wrong one, not a bad one, but the best one. He maybe said, I got to choose the lesser of two evils, right? That's how we love to put things sometimes. But it's for my own good, and I'm God's guy, I'm the king. So it's all okay. Now here's how I know he's selling himself, this story. He's trying to get himself to believe that a fiction is a fact. Joab sends a reporter back to the king to tell him how the battle is going on. And because of the order that David had given, it put the army in a vulnerable position. And they suffer a huge loss in this battle. And when the report comes back to David, he is furious. And he's mad at Joab that he would ever put the army in such a vulnerable position and get so many men killed. But Joab knew what David was up to. And so when he sent the messenger, he said, hey, when the king gets mad, say, oh, by the way, Uriah was one of the men that died. Now listen to the angry king's response. Well, tell Joab not to be discouraged then. The sword devours this one today and that one tomorrow. Fight harder next time and conquer the city. All of a sudden, it's all okay because the story came together and David's off the hook. This is okay. This worked out. It's for the good of me and the good of the kingdom. I deserve this. I've earned this. It's my right. And you and I look at this and we go, you are fooling yourself, David. You have conned yourself into believing that something so horrible could be a good thing and an okay thing. You have behaved in such a way that is deplorable, and you don't see anything wrong with it. It's because David never asked himself, am I being honest with myself? Really? Given what I know, given who I know, am I telling myself the truth when I say it's okay to order a man's execution so he doesn't find out that I got his wife pregnant? And I'm hoping that none of us are dealing at this kind of level with bad decisions that we've made, but we find ourselves in similar positions often. At least I do. Where I go, what was I thinking? And I'm learning I wasn't. I was selling myself a regret. I was selling myself the idea that no matter what happens on the other side of this, this is the right choice. Even though somewhere deep down inside I knew it wasn't. I just couldn't see it objectively. And neither could you when you made your choice. Luckily for David, he has a good friend named Nathan. Now, Nathan is a prophet, which back in the day was a person that was considered as one who speaks for God. And so when Nathan would show up, it was as if God was speaking himself. And a lot of times it was warning. We always think of prophets as like telling the future. It was more telling the truth. And so Nathan shows up to talk to David because God told him to go, you got to go straighten David out. He is so far off the tracks, it's unbelievable. And Nathan's really wise, and he knows I can't just step up to the king and go, you messed up. I'm going to have to get him to see his own decision from an objective position. And so Nathan tells him a story. This is what he says. There were two men in a certain town. One was rich and one was poor. The rich man owned a great many sheep and cattle. The poor man owned nothing but one little lamb he had bought. He raised that little lamb, and it grew up with his children. It ate from the man's plate and drank from his cup. It sounds a little like my dog, which is weird. He cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. One day, a guest arrived at the home of the rich man, not of the poor man. But instead of killing an animal from his own flock or herd, he took the poor man's lamb and killed it and prepared it for his guest. And David was furious. All of a sudden, the story looks different. Goes on. As surely as the Lord lives, David vowed, any man who would do such a thing deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for the one he stole and for having no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are that man. The man that you just objectively observed and say deserves to die for stealing something that belonged to someone else. That's you. And while it's not written this way, I think Nathan probably looked at David and said, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And maybe for the first time in months, David had to be honest with himself. Because he was able, because of this story, because of his friend Nathan, pull out of the emotion of it and realize the truth of it. He was able now to pull away from the fiction and look at the facts. And God is good, and if you know the rest of the story, the baby that Bathsheba has is actually Solomon, who becomes the next king of Israel and the wisest man to ever live. And he's got his own issues as well, but God's good in how he somehow uses our screw-ups for good things. But the question that David's faced with when Nathan brings this story and he realizes what he's done, it's a question of integrity. When we ask ourselves, am I being honest with myself? Really, it's a question of integrity. Now, integrity is a word we throw around a lot. We always say we want to be a person of integrity. But you may not know this. It comes from a Latin word that's integer, which is whole or complete. The idea being we don't live compartmentalized. We don't have a friends us and a family us and a work us and a hanging out with friends us, that all of those us's are integrated. They're working together. They flow into each other. They're not separate. We're not a fractured person walking around. We're a whole person. That's what it means to be a person of integrity. And I've been learning this the hard way because I crossed over the 40-year mark a few years ago. And as I've been experiencing my 40s, I've been getting angry. I've been getting angry with the internet and book publishers and magazine printers because they decided to start using smaller print. They started not having high resolution stuff. It made it really hard for me to read what they were trying to get me to read. It took a really good friend to go on the internet without my permission and buy me a pair of reading glasses. And what was amazing was when I put them on, all of a sudden I could see things that I had never seen before. I could make out words that I didn't even know were there. I realized something. The problem was not the printer. It was me. I was not being a person of integrity because I wasn't questioning what's my part in the problem. I was pointing the finger at everybody else. I wasn't integrating the part or the reality of being middle-aged now and how that affects my everyday life. You see, the problem when we tell ourselves fiction and we convince ourselves and we sell ourselves that it's the printer's fault, then when it's not going right, when we suffer the consequences of that, we blame them. And that's why I started with, you've been in on every bad decision you've ever made. You see, you and I, we don't see the world as it is. We see it how we see it. We don't see it objectively. We see it from our perspective, from our feelings, from our perceived needs. And so it's really difficult for us to be honest with ourselves. My challenge to you and my hope for you is that as you face major decisions going forward, when you find yourself at a crossroads or in the midst of a crisis or a really difficult circumstance, you will ask yourself this question: am I being honest with myself? Really? Am I blaming everybody else? Am I justifying bad action or bad choices or bad words? Am I telling myself this is all okay? Or is it really okay? Am I being honest? You can ask yourself this relationally. If you are in the midst of a marriage and at work, you're in the midst of a very flirty relationship that you have told yourself means nothing to you, are you being honest with yourself? Really? When you've had a falling out with one of your adult children and you are not speaking to them and you are convinced that it was their fault and you've never once entertained the notion that it could have been you too, are you being honest with yourself? When you're at work and you're thinking about cutting the corner because cutting the corner will get the job done sooner and maybe your boss will notice and they will give you a promotion and you have told yourself that it's okay because you're just trying to put food on the table, are you being honest with yourself? Really? When you walk out of here and you tell yourself, that's all hooey, I don't need that, that doesn't make any real difference in life, those people are crazy. Are you being honest with yourself? Really? Or are you selling yourself a regret? Let's pray. God, thank you for David, and sometimes I'm convinced he's a man after your own heart because he did things like this and learned from them. God, I know as I've been talking this morning, you've probably been sitting here going, are you listening? Because you, Josh, have sold yourself so many ridiculous fictions and lies to justify your choices. I know. So I'm going to ask that you would help me in the days ahead, weeks ahead, seasons ahead, to get honest with myself and check myself regularly by asking this question. And I ask that you would bring it to mind for my friends as we face this afternoon and tomorrow and the week and the month and the year and so on. Help us to be prudent and wise and look ahead and ask ourselves, where is it that I want to go? What do I want to be true at the end? And make the best choices as we go, honestly with ourselves. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks so much for letting us be part of your week, everybody. I hope you have an awesome one. We'll see you back here for part 4 next week. Invite a friend. We'll see you then.